Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Dominic was sitting in his office, checking the company records. The man held a very high position, and he was no less than an oil magnate. Now that he was in his 60s, he was confidently running a huge business, solving serious problems and difficulties. But once everything started from scratch, he traveled all over the country with geologists, spent many years on drilling rigs, looked around, mastered new ways of drilling hard rocks, and finally, according to his own calculations, opened his own oil well. It was a huge risk, but as it turned out, not for nothing, the man got rich as if by magic. While he was engaged in the oil business, which took up a lot of time and energy, his own family was led by his faithful wife, Anna. She could be relied upon for everything, for she was resolute, commanding, and intelligent. Son John was a late child, for it took half his life to achieve prosperity and serious weight in society. The boy grew up practically without his father, as he was busy working around the clock, with his mother in charge of everything in the house. The son studied well, graduated from university, and also followed in his father's footsteps, began to help him in business. He often went on business trips, met with business partners, and ran branches. But his personal life did not work out so well. I fell in love with one girl strongly, but it did not work out. Her mother insisted on a profitable marriage with the judge's daughter, Diana. But it turned out that she was childless, and even promiscuous at that. So John decided to take a child from the orphanage and adopted the baby. The girl was 2 years old, not even a baby. His wife supported the idea at first, but when it came to diapers and sleep deprivation, she realized that she did not want children. Her adopted daughter only irritated her, demanded a lot of care and attention. Neglectful mother was quickly fed up with it all, and soon she betrayed the family without remorse, taking off abroad with her lover. John suffered greatly, but the little girl was not abandoned, not given back to the orphanage. Hired a nanny and raised little Rosalind. And a year ago, when son tragically died, John went to business negotiations with a large sum of money, and that was it. All they found was a completely burned out car and a charred body. It is impossible to describe the grief from the loss of my only son and heir. They did not want to live at all, but there was no way to lose heart. They now had little Rosalind. After his son's death, Dominic and his wife began to raise their granddaughter by themselves. 5-year-old Rosalind was an outlet for the Tycoon. He adored her and didn't dote on her. The businessman's wife also shook like a bird over the rosy-cheeked, chubby princess and demanded from the nurse to strictly follow all the rules of education, especially when she hugged them tightly and whispered, "Grandpa, Grandma, I love you so much." The girl remembered her father, loved him dearly, and often asked where he was and when he was coming home, because John was often away on business trips. But the couple never dared to tell her the awful truth, so as not to traumatize the child's psyche, and kept promising that Daddy would be back soon. A phone call brought the businessman out of his flashbacks. On the other end of the line, Elisaveta, Rosalina's elderly nurse, rattled excitedly, "Dominic, we've got an emergency." I was walking with Rosalina. She was sledding with the kids down the mountain, but they went the wrong way, and the little girl almost fell into the river. And I'm clumsy. I can't keep up with her. Thank God a quick-looking kid was nearby. He sells old books on the quay. He didn't look pretty. He looked like a homeless kid. So he saved her, literally by the scruff of the neck, pulled. "I'm so sorry. But do not worry. The girl is now all right. We are home." Changed her clothes. I steamed her feet just in case. The businessman jumped up from his chair and shouted angrily, "I'll be right there." "Why are you like that? This is pure negligence. And if it wasn't for that brave boy, what then?" The man rushed home, burst into the room, and hugged his granddaughter. "Rosalind, granddaughter, are you all right? Why don't you listen to your nanny?" The frightened little girl began to babble. "It's okay, Grandpa. Don't yell. Please, I won't do it again. Max rescued me one boy. He also gave me a book so I wouldn't cry. As a memento. It's so beautiful and interesting. There are such fairy tales in there, even the babysitter doesn't know them. And my grandmother probably doesn't either. The businessman asked, That's good, Max, brave boy. But show me, what is this book? The little girl handed him a beautiful old leather-bound book of fairy tales. He opened the first page, read something there, and froze. Then he changed his face. A cold sweat broke out over him and began to ask the nurse question. Elizabeth, what does this Max look like and where can I find him? I want to thank him, the woman replied. He stands there every day on the waterfront selling old books. He's a skinny, blonde boy. He has a distinctive mole on his cheek. You'll know him when you see him. Dressed poorly and untidily. Don't scold me too much. I know it's my own fault. Most importantly, don't tell Anna, or she'll kick me out in a jiffy. She's got a temper. Dominic smiled. Yeah, you can't fool around with my wife. Okay. It's a deal. I won't say anything. But Rosaline must be warned. She's like a partisan who knows how to keep a secret. And you please keep a better eye on my weasel. Don't let it happen again. The businessman spent the whole night without sleep, turning around, thinking a lot. Remembering, quietly drinking cognac in the kitchen and not finding his place. He could hardly wait for the next morning and rush to the office, not to work at all. The man drove straight to the embankment, spun around, looked around but didn't see anyone who looked like the boy. So he asked the street vendors, I'm looking for a boy, Max, who sells interesting old books here. I don't see him. They responded briskly, Yeah, he's not here today. He's gone. He trades almost every day. So you'll catch him again. Oh, that poor boy. Such grief. The businessman went to the waterfront every day, but the boy was still missing. He caught him on the fourth day. Max was small and puny. It was freezing outside, and he was dressed in a light, worn-out demi-season jacket and summer sneakers on thin soles. All the time, he was shifting from foot to foot and warming his stiff fingers in his pockets. The businessman came over, began to look at the unique, expensive books and asked, Hello, is your name Max? How much do you sell books and where did you get them from, if it's not a secret? The frightened boy shrank back at the sight of such a respectable man and answered quietly, Yes, I'm Max. Take the fairy tales, they are very interesting. Only 250 rubles. Do not think they are not stolen. Just my mom collected their whole life. She worked as a librarian, collected, and now she is very sick, so I sell them to save money for surgery. And to buy something to eat at home. Dominic's heart sank and went in his heels. In spite of the freezing cold, he felt a sudden rush of fever. That's right, it's her. There's no such thing as a coincidence. He continued the conversation. Let me buy them all from you. In bulk. You just saved my granddaughter. You kept her from falling in the river. Her name is Rosaline. Thank you, you brave boy. Will you invite me to visit? Maybe I'll buy some more books from you. I collect them too. You can introduce me to your mother too. Maybe I can help you with something. The joyful little boy carefully counted and carefully put the money in a small purse. Then he said, Sure, let's go. But if you wait here for a while, I'll quickly run to the store and buy milk and rice, porridge for me and my mother to boil, and some bread, okay? I haven't eaten anything since this morning. The businessman nodded, saying, Run. But he stood there like a dead man, holding ancient books in his hands and remembering the past, swallowing his tears. His son John was always very willful, and in spite of his very authoritarian mother, who tried to lead everything, often went against her in his decisions. He believed that he had his own opinion and did not have to go along with anyone. It so happened that in his youth my son fell madly in love with an ordinary girl, a librarian from a poor family, Victoria. They met by chance in a cafe, and Victoria was so ingrained in John's soul that he could not go a day without her. Dominic remembered how enthusiastic his son had been about her. "Dad, you see, she's not like all those rich fools. Victoria is smart and well-read, and she's also so beautiful. She almost doesn't wear makeup. She doesn't need it. And her hair, what satin long braids. I haven't seen anyone like that. She's so interesting to me. Easy and good. I even think about her all night long. May I invite her to visit? You will like her for sure." That was John's biggest mistake. Her mother was furious with the girl as soon as she found out she was from a poor and unpromising family. The rest of the evening was uneventful. The landlady kept asking Victoria uncomfortable and even obscene questions, and making it clear that she was not welcome here. She had a stereotype, imposed secular life, that they now belonged to high society, and therefore need to marry a girl from a wealthy family. Their level that she was not ashamed to appear with her in the local beau monde. Victoria was upset and ran home in tears, and John resented his parents for this warm reception of his bride and went to calm her down. The whole situation was extremely unpleasant to the businessman. He tried to talk to his wife, but all was in vain. She kept repeating as a wounded same thing. "I did not raise my son to marry the daughter of alcoholics. There would never be any Victoria. I will lay down my bones, but I will destroy this stupid union. My son will thank me later." Poor Victoria Anna was tearing up and throwing herself, trying to convince her son, "John, don't be silly. Come to your senses. What do you want with that beggar girl? Who are her parents? Why do we need that kind of kinship? She's a pretty girl, no doubt about it. I understand everything. She's young. You've had your fun, and that's enough. Stop this childishness and turn your attention to normal girls. You're a businessman after all." The son was indignant, and Victoria is not normal. Why is that? She's well-read, speaks perfect English, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, is very well-mannered. What's wrong with her? You can't choose your parents. Is it her fault they drink? And the fact that we love each other, that's not an argument, do you think? It turns out that dumb Susan, for example, the daughter of a businessman, who whisks and looks like a 30-year-old aunt, she is worthy of high society, and my Victoria are high society. And my Victoria, is that how it works? Well, no, you have your opinion. I have mine. And I'll marry the one I love, not the one you're trying to force on me. Such scandals were becoming more and more frequent, and John continued to see Victoria anyway, and he was even going to leave his parents and rent a house with her. Dominic himself didn't mind Victoria at all. He liked the potential daughter-in-law. She was plain and modest. He couldn't stand those stuck-up, snooty young ladies who thought they were God knows what. He had spent half his life on the oil rigs with ordinary men, and he liked hard-working, unpretentious people. Many of them had achieved a lot, and status had nothing to do with it. But his wife couldn't explain it. She had it in her head that if John and Victoria were to be separated, that would be the end of it. Dominic preferred not to get involved in family quarrels, and he had no time, so to speak, to be a neutral party in the matter. John, despite his mother's exhortations, continued to meet Victoria and asked his father to help him get a very rare book, Nenet's Fairy Tales. Victoria was a librarian and collected books. It was her hobby. So 3 days ago, the little boy from the embankment gave this very book to Rosalina. There could be no doubt, because on the first page was the inscription, "To my beloved Tomochaka, for a long memory." Why John had broken up with Victoria, Dominic never really knew, whether it was jealousy or stupidity. But it had happened so abruptly, unexpectedly. My son suffered a lot, became withdrawn, and for a long time he couldn't have a long-time relationship with anyone else. Little by little over time, the son came to his senses. His mother persuaded him to marry unloved, but the judge's daughter, Olga, that's where the cunning madam was. She loved only herself and was engaged only in the fact that all day hitting the beauty salons and fashionable, glamorous parties. And after the appearance of Rosaline, she ran off to Europe with her lover. So much for the girl from high society, embarrassing them to the whole world. After her son's death, Anna gave up a lot, kicked herself 100 times for being against her son's marriage to Victoria at the time, and actually broke John's fate. She often cried on his grave and begged forgiveness. But she accepted Rosalind at once and loved her, as if she were her own. Since then, the old woman looked at many things in life differently, but her son was no longer returned. Max shouted, "I'm back already." "Well, Uncle, shall we go and visit? It's too cold to stand around. It's freezing today." They got in the car, and the baby began to show the way. We didn't go far, but it was all in some back alleys. When Dominic entered the old dormitory, he almost collapsed. The smell of fried fish, tobacco, damp, and something else very disgusting hit his nose. There were children running through the corridors, women hanging their laundry on the ropes in the hallway, talking loudly, and some drunk guy climbing on all fours in the corner, all in all darkness. The businessman had already forgotten that people live like this. The boy opened the shabby door with the key, and they entered the room. It was poor but very clean, with violets blooming on the windowsills, and a beautifully embroidered handmade tablecloth on the table. On the sofa, under a blanket, lay a thin, almost transparent, sickly woman, and was reading a book. When she heard the footsteps, she exclaimed joyfully, "Max, my son, are you back yet? How cold are you?" Then she looked at Dominic and suddenly stopped herself. The businessman recognized her eyes. They were still as beautiful, bottomless, and unspeakably sad. Dominic even wept and rushed over to her. "Victoria? Victoria, it's me, Dominic, John's father. You remember me? What's the matter with you? How are you? My God, it's been so long." The woman, seeing the glossy, well-dressed businessman, recognized him, of course. She changed her face and turned pale. She felt very uncomfortable that he saw her so infirm, and she and her son lived like church mice. "Hello, Dominic, of course I remember. It's been 9 years, which is how old Max is now. How's John? Is he all right? Married, I suppose? I hope you found yourself a high society daughter." "I hope you found yourself a high society daughter." The businessman turned sullen at once. "John died tragically a year ago. He went on a business trip, and I never saw him alive again. The car was found completely burnt out, and the body was so charred that all I recognized was his belt buckle and ring. Now we're raising our granddaughter, Rosalind. My son adopted her shortly before he died, took her from an orphanage. He really wanted children. He was raving about them. And his wife, Diane, couldn't or wouldn't give birth, I don't know. And then she went abroad with her lover. That's the way it is. Victoria, why did you and John break up? I never understood, to tell you the truth. My son suffered a long time. He couldn't get over you. Tell me, Max, is he my grandson? I knew it when I saw him. For some reason, he had the same mole as John on his cheek." Victoria sighed, wiped away a tear, and said, "Why we broke up? I don't want to tell you. It still hurts a lot. Ask your spouse. She did it. I didn't know about John. I'm sorry. Really. I secretly hoped that maybe God would give. and we would meet again. I loved him very much and still do. I never could tie my life to anyone else. And Max is his son, it's true. I realized I was pregnant after we broke up. I cried and suffered for a long time. I wondered if I should tell him or not. I was scared. There was no one to help me. But my pride kicked in. I decided that since your son doesn't need me, neither does the baby. So I'm dragging him all by myself. It's very hard, I can't deny it, especially now that I'm sick. My poor son is worried about me. Runs over there my collection of books sells at least to earn a piece of bread. And I can't even buy him winter boots. Poor thing, still wearing sneakers. Dominic asked, "What are you sick with? Maybe I can help." "Is this something serious?" Victoria replied sadly. "It's a very rare genetic disease. The knee joint is gradually deteriorating. It needs a very expensive operation to replace it. Then you can live normally. But I will never be able to get that kind of money. So I'm suffering. I can't stand up anymore. My leg is swollen. I can't bend. I can hardly go to the toilet. I can't even think what will happen next. I'm worried about my son, who he will stay with." And she wept quietly in hopelessness. The man took Victoria's hand emotionally. It was cold and lifeless. "Victoria, don't worry. I'll start looking for a clinic that deals with such cases today. I need all your examinations, tests, and hospital records. You will walk and live normally. I promise. And don't worry about Max. I'll take him with me while you're being treated. You're not strangers. I won't leave you. Here, take the money for the first time, and I'll take care of everything. Wait for me. I won't be long." Victoria cried, "Why would you bother with me? You hated me. You were against my relationship with John. What do you care if I die or live? Or is this another conspiracy? I wouldn't be surprised at anything." The businessman became terribly ashamed and shrank his eyes. "Forgive us, Victoria. After John died, we regretted 100 times that we didn't let you see each other. He never fell in love with anyone else but you, and his life was all messed up. So I want to make up for my sins, even if it's too late. You're a good woman. We made a mess of your life too, didn't we? Cheer up. Everything will be all right." Then Max entered the room, carrying a tray of steaming porridge from the common kitchen and croutons. He sat down beside his mother's bed and put the food on a chair. "Mommy, I made you some porridge and fried some croutons. Aunt Molly showed me how to do it in the kitchen. Let me help you sit down. I've got to eat. Taste it. It's delicious. I ate a whole plate myself." Dominic even wept. It's crazy. A 9-year-old child taking care of his mother just as well as an experienced caregiver. He helped the boy sit Victoria down, and she ate, then hugged Max and whispered, "Thank you, my son. You're my good and kind boy. What would I do without you?" The boy glowed and busily went to wash the dishes. Dominic wanted eerily to cradle the boy in his arms. Grandson, my own grandson. Everything inside was jubilant and singing, but he didn't know how to do it, much less without Victoria's permission. A thought flashed through his mind that made him feel cold inside. What if she wouldn't let us talk and she would tell the child what had happened? I would have to talk to Victoria, but later. The businessman, when he arrived at the office, first called his deputy and instructed him to look for a good clinic, and then he rushed home after taking care of his business. He decided by all means to find out the truth from his wife and find out what she had done, because he already knew for sure that the breakup between John and Victoria was her doing. Anna was just bustling about in the kitchen and was excited to see her husband. "Hey, Dominic, did you decide to come home early today? Nice to meet you. Wash your hands and come to the table. I made pike. Perch sauce and avocado salad. Elizabeth, our babysitter, told me a new recipe that should be delicious." The businessman frowned and set the dish aside and began, "Anna, tell me straight out. Why did John and Victoria break up years ago? I know you did it. All I want is the truth." The woman made round eyes. "What's the tone? And why these irrelevant questions? My son is dead. He's gone. You know this is a painful subject for me. I'm not going to say anything. Why do you bring up the past?" But the husband was not going to retreat and went on the attack again. Answer now. I'm not in the mood for jokes right now. I found Victoria. Do you even know that she's been raising our own grandson all these years by herself? Not only that, but she's very sick and needs an operation. Whose fault do you think it is? Do you have any idea what we've done? We ruined my son's life. He dreamed so much about having kids, and now he has a son. He looks exactly like John. He even has the same mole on his cheek. He's a wonderful, wonderful boy. If you had seen how selflessly he takes care of his sick mother, and this at the age of 9. I want to know the truth. Why and how did John and Victoria break up? Anna suddenly fell silent and blushed. She was terribly ashamed and unpleasant to remember everything, but she understood from her husband's tone that it was pointless to deny and cajole. Yes, I broke them up. I asked an acquaintance to do a photo montage and put Victoria's face on the naked lady's body, and another guy was lying next to her. And then she slipped the picture to John, with a note saying, "Look, you cuckold, what your fiancé is doing." That's it. And then they had a big fight of their own. John was wildly jealous and mad, and Victoria was very proud, mortally offended, and so they broke up. Dominic couldn't hold back any longer and screamed in a way that made the veins in his neck swell with anger. Anna, why? Answer me. Does it make you feel better that John broke his life because he never fell in love with anybody but that girl? You'd have had a good life and raised your son. What have you done? And I'm a fool. I didn't pay much attention. I just let it go. Anna suddenly burst into tears so sincerely and bitterly. Don't yell at me. I don't know why. At that time it seemed to me that I was doing everything right. How is it that there is no reason to be related to a beggar? It was only later, much later, when I saw how my son was suffering, how he was suffering with an unloved and promiscuous Diana, it began to dawn on me what I had done. Forgive me, please. Should I go hang myself now? The husband thawed out. He couldn't see the women's tears, and he hugged his wife. All right, you can't take it back. They're both good, I'll give you that. You should have seen her leg. It's swollen and doesn't move. Victoria can barely stand up, a total disability. And yet she is a young and beautiful woman. She's worried about her son. Max will stay with us for a while. I hope you don't mind your own grandson. Anna wiped away her tears and mouthed, No, of course not. I adore Rosalina, and I will love my grandson, and I will make peace with Victoria. I will ask her forgiveness. I promise. At the noise of the commotion, Rosalind ran out of the nursery and rushed to hug Grandpa. Hello, Grandpa. Are we going to have someone living with us? I heard. And why were you arguing here? Dominic laughed and lightly poked his granddaughter on the nose. Who's the nosy one eavesdropping on adult conversations? Yes, that same boy Max is going to live with us while his mother is being treated. Turns out he's no stranger to us. He's my grandson, too. Can you believe it? That's how it happens. You don't mind, do you? Will you share your toys with him? Rosalind clapped her hands and was very happy. Hooray! Max is good. He saved me. And kind. When is he coming? I'll go make him a present, too. I'll draw a picture. Anna raised an eyebrow in surprise. I don't understand, but how does Rosalind know Max? What did he save her from? Is there something I don't know? The businessman smiled slyly. It was our little secret. But the chatterbox granddaughter couldn't keep it. I'll tell you, but promise you won't scold the babysitter. The other day they were out for a walk, sledding down the hill on the embankment. Rosalina's sled went the wrong way, and she nearly fell into the river. Elizabeth, of course, rushed after her, but could she have had time? And Max was just there selling books, and he ran up in time to save our granddaughter, and even gave her something to remember. I'll show you. The man pulled out the very same storybook. See, I was the one who helped John, and I was the one who ordered it for Victoria. That's how I knew he was my grandson. And then he took me to his mother. You should see how Victoria is suffering right now. She's so thin, she's so transparent. We must help her. Do you understand? Anna answered quietly. God, Oleza. Sure, let's help. Go right now and pick them up. I don't mind. A couple of days later, a great clinic was found for Victoria, and she was operated on, and Max was taken in by his grandparents. At first, the boy was timid and shy. He'd never been to such a fancy mansion. But Jolly Rosaline helped him quickly get accustomed. They played and drew together. The boy treated her like a little sister, patronized her, and made sure that nothing happened to her. Anna often looked at the boy and cried softly. He was so much like John. She even pulled out a baby picture of her son, just a copy. The same serious look from under his eyebrows and a mole on his cheek. She was so ashamed of her terrible act. Her conscience was burning inside her like a burning iron. She was cursing herself. It might have been different. Why had I torn them apart? It was as if I had been possessed. And I can't bring my son back, and I can't bring my son back, and I can't ask forgiveness. Fortunately, the surgery was successful. The knee joint was replaced, and there was a long rehabilitation period ahead. Victoria received frequent visits from the whole family. Max and Rosalind drew pictures of them all together, holding hands. Grandpa, Grandma, the children, Mom and Dad. Dad was always present in each of the drawings. The adults didn't scold Rosalind for that. They understood that the girl just missed him very much, and Misha just wanted very much to have a father too. When they first came to Victoria's room, at first everyone was talking about her health, discussing what the doctor predicted. Max was hugging and stroking Mommy, treating her with tangerines. He missed her so much. And then Anna asked, "My dears, leave Victoria and me alone. I have something very important to tell her. Buy me a coffee in the meantime. If you don't mind." Dominic understood everything at once, and without talking he took the children away, promising to buy them delicious cakes, and Anna sighed, looked the unsuccessful daughter, in law in the eyes, gathered her spirit and said, "Victoria, I repent. I am very much guilty before you, and there is no forgiveness for me. It was me who set up those ill-fated pictures. I thought it would be better, as if the devil had got into me. When John died, I regretted so many times what I had done. He loved you so much, and he couldn't make a family with anybody else. Forgive me if you can. I know you can't get anything back, and you can't raise John from the grave, but now that we know we have such a wonderful grandson, Max, can we just forget all the hard feelings? When you get better, come stay with us. The mansion is huge. There's enough room for everyone. I promise I'll never hurt you again." Victoria didn't try to wiggle her way out of it and answered honestly, "You know, Anna, I won't hide it. I knew at once whose hands those photos were. For many years after that, I hated you. I could not understand why, and for what you ruined our relations. I often thought about it, and then I looked at it from the other side. John and I had a lot of faults ourselves. We were both angry and stubborn, like two sheep. We each argued for what was right instead of sitting down, talking calmly, and figuring things out. Apparently, he did not trust me 100% since he believed that stupid picture, and I was too proud and touchy. I found out about the pregnancy almost immediately as we broke up because I could have called to tell him. But no, I decided that I would not impose. I will raise myself. I secretly hoped that maybe he would come to his senses and come back to me. In general, both are good. It turned out as it turned out. To be honest, I am very tired of being alone all these years. It is hard to raise a child on my own. And I am very glad and grateful to your husband that he found me and helped me. I will gladly accept your offer. Dibs on the contract. No more innuendo. It is better to discuss everything at once. All right? The women embraced warmly, and both felt relieved, as if a heavy burden of resentment and misunderstanding accumulated over many years had been lifted. Victoria was quickly on the mend, and within a month she was walking with a cane on her own again, and she was discharged home. Now, the whole big family was living in the mansion. Every day the relationship between John and Victoria's parents grew warmer and warmer, and soon they couldn't imagine how they could live without each other. Women enjoyed messing around in the kitchen and surprised the owner of the house and the kids with various treats. Anna conjured up the appearance of her daughter-in-law and took her to the best beauty salon and boutiques. As a result, even her own son Max barely recognized his mother. Victoria was again the same papery beauty that she was in her youth, the same long, mirrored and thick hair and a fresh, well-groomed face and stylish and modern clothes and delicate nude cure made her 10 years younger, exactly. Max didn't look like a street kid now either. He was in a prestigious gymnasium, went to boxing and swimming, and just adored, like Rosalind, his grandfather. One night, Dominic got up for a drink of water, and suddenly he heard his sister-in-law's room screaming. He was frightened, wondering if the woman was sick or ill, so he rushed in. He knocked quietly. "Victoria, baby, are you all right? I heard you screaming." My daughter-in-law opened the door. She was pale and frightened, and was wiping cold sweat from her forehead with her handkerchief. Anna jumped out at the noise and asked sympathetically, "What's going on, Victoria? Are you sick? You look pale, you're shaking all over. Should we call a doctor at home?" My daughter-in-law whispered softly, "Let's go in the kitchen and I'll tell you something," so as not to wake the children upstairs. Victoria drank some water from the decanter, calmed down a little, and began to talk. "You see, I've had the same nightmare over and over again. It's like John is alive, but his head is bloody and he's holding on to it and begging to be saved, just like that. My love, take me away, I'm sick, find me." And so it goes on and on. Now, the dream was almost the same, but John said one more word, or rather repeated it many times. Sans, what could it be? I don't know what to do. Could he really be alive? Is he suffering somewhere and needs help? Or is it just my sick imagination? I should see a psychiatrist. Anna objected. "You shouldn't say that. I personally believe in dreams of faith. I, too, only once in my life, but I had a dream I believed in. I was pregnant with John. I dreamed that I lost my son, looking for him in the stroller and in the crib, but he was not, and at the very end the dog brought him to me, right by the scruff of the neck. I remember being surprised. What kind of nonsense is this? What was that all about? Well, it took a year for the dream to come true. I had already forgotten about it 100 times. So my husband and I were visiting friends for a birthday party, and we decided to walk back. It was nighttime, and John was sitting in a sled. He must have fallen asleep on the way and fell out. I rushed out. "No son," I shouted, cursed my husband, sobbing, and the sled was empty. Suddenly we heard a dog barking. We went over there, and our child is sleeping like an angel where he fell. The dog noticed him and raised a bark. So much for the dream of a prophetic dream. So anything's possible. What if John really survived? We didn't do a forensic examination, did we? We didn't have time for that. The shock and the grief and the pain. I couldn't even go to the lineup. I fainted, and my husband only recognized his thing. And now I'm thinking maybe it wasn't John at all. Dominic became serious and thoughtful, then suddenly ran into the study and brought out the map. He laid it out right on the table and began to think. The puzzled women just looked at each other and were silent, not understanding anything. Then the businessman pointed his finger at some point on the map and exclaimed, "There it is. It's a village 100 kilometers from where John died. It's called the Sands, because it is located in a sandy area. There is also a huge quarry. Tomorrow morning, Victoria, we'll go there with you. Let's check it just in case." What if it really is a dream? Even if there is a 1 in a billion chance that the sun survived, we have to check it. Barely waiting for dawn, Dominic and Victoria took a thermos of sandwiches and set out on their journey, which was not a long one. They arrived in the village towards evening. They saw old ladies sitting on a bench and decided to ask, "Good evening, good people. Can you please tell us? We are looking for a man. Here is a picture. Have you by any chance seen him in the village? That's my son?" The old ladies turned the picture around and answered, "He's the man that our local woodcutters found a year ago with his head bashed in. He stayed with Karen, the healer, and that's how he got used to it. She nursed him back to health and left him with her. The poor guy lost his memory. He can't even remember his name. The whole village dressed him to keep him warm. Over there, her house on the outskirts near the woods." Dominic couldn't believe what he was hearing. Victoria was sobbing, and they immediately rushed to the healer's hut. They knocked, and a gaunt old woman came out on the porch and asked, "Hello, dear guests, who are you? Do you need help or is someone sick?" "I don't remember. What village are you from?" Dominic showed the old lady the photo with shaking hands. "It's my son, John. We thought he died a year ago. We even buried him. Do you have him? Do you have him? Can you get him for me, please?" The astonished granny shouted, "Dustin, go. Your relatives are here to see you." "Oh my God, I thought no one would even look for him. It's been so long. It's been so long. It's so sad for the man. He's suffering. He can't remember anything, not even his name. That's how it is. When they brought him to me, I even crossed my eyes. I thought he would not survive. By God. His head was covered in blood and his skull was badly damaged. I had so much trouble with him. I nursed him for a long time. He was throwing up and vomiting, and I could see he had a bad concussion. And then John came out into the courtyard in a fur coat and valenki with a long, thick beard, but most importantly, alive and well. Victoria shrieked, couldn't stand it, and threw herself on his neck, forgetting all her insults. "John, my love, you're alive after all. What a joy." She sobbed and stroked his head, unable to control herself. The father hugged his son too. "Son, I can't believe my eyes. We thought you were dead. We buried you. We were so sad. Victoria had a dream that you were alive and here. So here we are, even though we didn't believe it was possible. Now I believe in mysticism. How happy my mother will be. Why are you looking so strange? Don't you remember anything at all? Your name is John, and I'm your father, Dominic, and this is your fiancée, Victoria. Come on, son, remember. You loved Victoria so much, you must remember." The man suddenly grabbed his head and shook it and sobbed out loud. "God, it's like a flash, like lightning. I remembered. Daddy, I remember everything. Victoria, honey, we broke up stupidly. I was jealous of you. I'm so glad we found you. How did you even find me? Grandma Karen helped me out, thanks to her, but I've lost my memory. I close my eyes and there's nothing. If you only knew how scary it is not to remember anything. When I look in the mirror over the wash basin, some strange man looks at you. You know absolutely nothing about him. It's like you're not even a person, just a shadow, Fan Victorious. That's how people often end up homeless. If it wasn't for Grandma Karen, where would you go if you didn't know anything about yourself? No documents, nothing at all. Sometimes I'd get so bored I'd howl. I thought, what am I going to do? Sit on an old lady's neck for the rest of my life? Of course, my fellow villagers pitied me, invited me to do part. Mine work, to mow the grass, but is that really life? Dominic put his arm around the old lady. Thank you very much for saving my son. I now owe you one. I'll do anything for you. You say the lumberjacks found my son. Where do they live? I would like to personally thank them for my son. Grandma was embarrassed. I don't need anything. especially since I didn't do anything. I just fixed the guy up, that's all. What kind of an animal am I to chase a man with no memory out into the street? I gave him a room, everything as it should be. We became friends. He fixed my porch, made hay for the winter for my goat, and helped me in the garden. It was a pity to part with him, but I'm glad you found your son. I saw how my guest was pining, howling quietly at night, and trying to remember at least something about himself. All the best to you. Goodbye. John gave the old woman a warm hug goodbye, and they drove home. On the way, they stopped at the lumberjacks, Stefan and Nikita, who had saved John and brought him to the healer. Dominic thanked them generously, giving them each a decent sum of money. He shook their hands. You guys are heroes. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You could have walked right by us. And then John wouldn't have survived for sure. The men were embarrassed and responded. We were going to the clearing that day, and Ryzik the dog was with us. He started barking and wouldn't leave the ditch. So we went to see what was going on. When we saw your son, he was covered with blood and not moving. We thought he was dead. Then we dared a bit and came closer, and he was breathing. So we put him on our shoulder and ran to Grandma Karen. That's the whole story. It's a good thing you remembered, John, and found your folks. Good luck to you. All the way home, John kept turning his head, asking me to slow down, as if he were trying to remember something else. He kept looking around, and then he suddenly yelled at the curve, Dad! Dad! Stop right there, please. This is where it all happened. I remember I was on my way to a meeting, and suddenly I saw a man lying on the ground, and the other man was waving his arms, saying, Stop, help me. So I foolishly stopped. I thought maybe he was too ill. It can happen. I just came up to them, bent over, and suddenly something heavy flew on the back of my head. I was found in that ditch by the loggers after a day, and they brought me to the healer, Grandma Karen. And then, God, I even remembered their faces. Well, how about that? One was in a cap with a mustache, about 40 years old, and the other was young, twirly such, my build and height. I'm surprised myself. Just yesterday I did not know anything about myself, but I saw you, and something clicked, as if someone turned on a toggle switch in my head. I remembered everything. Father, what about Rosaline? How's Rosaline? My daughter. You didn't give her back to the orphanage, did you? Does she live with you? She's probably forgotten me by now. It's a joke, not seeing her father for a year. And your mother? Dominic reassured his son. Don't worry, Rosalind is with us. We love her very much. She remembers you and misses you very much. We never dared to tell her that you died. My daughter thinks you are on a business trip and will be back soon. Victoria smiled. That's not all the news. You have a son too, your own son Max. He's 9 years old. When we broke up, I found out I was pregnant. But I was stupid. I didn't tell you anything. I didn't call you. I had to raise my son on my own. It was hard. I can't tell you how hard it was. And especially when I got sick. Max often asked where Daddy was. But what could I tell him? I lied that he was very far away and couldn't live with us. And recently Dominic found me, helped me with my surgery. We made up with your mom, and now we all live together in the big house. God, John, what a miracle you've turned up. John was crying. He couldn't hold back. That's the news. I have a son, too. I wouldn't have dreamed of it. I wanted kids so badly. Will Max accept me? Wouldn't he be offended that his father had been away for so many years and hadn't visited him? Victoria, what young fools we were. Forgive me, my little swallow, for I was angry then, for I believed the tales about you, for I doubted your faithfulness. How many times have I regretted it? Even when I lost my memory, I dreamed of your image at night, and I kept thinking when I woke up, who was this beautiful stranger? Could she be my wife or my sister? Why do I dream about her every night? They had been waiting for them at home for a long time. Anna was exhausted. She was imagining things. When her beloved son finally entered his home, alive and well, she cried out, grabbed her heart, and fainted like a stone. A commotion broke out. Victoria brought smelling salts. Dominic splashed water on her, and John dropped to his knees beside her on the floor and whispered, "Mommy, honey, what are you doing?" "It's me, John, your son. You're finally awake." "Ooh, you're so scary." Anna opened her eyes and began stroking and touching her own blood to make sure that this was really happening. Then suddenly she cried, "John, my son, forgive me. It's all my fault. I messed up your life with Tomochka. I messed up your fate. How happy I am that you're alive. I was black with grief when we buried you. I blamed myself for coming to my senses late and for not being able to change anything. Oh, my darling, let me hold you tight. I keep thinking I'm dreaming." The son hugged his mother tightly and comforted her. "That's enough, Mommy. That's enough. Don't blame yourself. What happened is long gone. Let's not remember the bad things. The main thing is that Victoria is with you, and you have reconciled." "Wait a minute. Where are my kids? Where's my sweet bun?" Rosalind immediately came running out of the nursery and began to caress her father, kissing him, hugging him, and crying, "Daddy, Daddy, I missed you so much. Why didn't you come for so long? I waited and waited for you, but you never came. Don't go away again, okay? You promise?" John kissed the chubby cheeks, inhaled the scent of childhood, and whispered, "I missed you too, my good man. I'm not going anywhere else. I'll be with my Rosaline." Max, on the other hand, stood quietly to the side and just watched, frowning. He looked at John incredulously sideways. The man finally lowered his daughter to the floor and approached the boy. "Hello, son. How you've grown?" "What a grown-up already. Shall we get acquainted? I'm your daddy, John." The boy did not hold out his father's hand and said quietly, "Where have you been? Why didn't you show up until now? Do you know how my mother and I lived? How sick she was? If Grandpa Dominic hadn't found me, I don't know if she would have survived. Why didn't he come to me and my mom before? I'm not Rosalind and I'm not 5 years old. You don't love us. If you did, you wouldn't have left us." And Max pushed his father away in tears and ran to his room. There was a deathly silence in the hallway. John clearly did not expect such a violent negative reaction of the boy, and dazed, not knowing what to do, then sadly stated, "Well, right. What did I want? For him to throw himself on my neck. It's the first time he's even seen me. He probably thinks I've been away somewhere on purpose and haven't been to see him. He probably won't forgive me. It's a shame because I knew nothing about him. What should I do?" Victoria said quietly, "Don't get upset, John. Give him time to get used to it. It's too much stress for him. He's a smart, good boy, and he'll understand. I'll talk to him." Anna clutched her head. "It's all my fault. I've separated a father from his son for years." Of course, Max was hurt. He thought John had abandoned them, hadn't visited, and he didn't even know it. That's when Dominic decided to intervene. "Victoria, may I speak to my grandson myself? I think he'll hear me. He's old and smart, just like me." Grandpa knocked on Max's room. "Grandchild, please open up. I need to talk to you." An ardent Max opened the door and waved his hand. "Come in, Grandpa. You're always welcome." Dominic sighed and began carefully choosing each word to explain to his grandson. "You see, Max, life is complicated. Adults often do stupid things, and sometimes even mean things that they regret for years. You're an adult now. I don't want to lie to you or make something up. Your father didn't communicate with you, not because he doesn't love you and your mother, but because he didn't know anything about you at all. You know. He just found out today that he had his own son, and he cried with happiness. Whose fault is that? It's a tough question, Everybody's to blame. Even me. Your parents loved each other very much. I was a witness. But then they had a big fight. And when your mom realized that you were already in the belly, she didn't say anything to your dad because of her resentment towards him. It happens that way. But look on the bright side. Your mom is smart. She raised you. She loved you. She loved you. She loved you dearly. And now you've got a daddy and a grandpa and a grandma and a grandma and a little sister Rosalind. Is that so bad? Don't be angry with your father. It hurts him. And it hurts you too. Think about what I said. You're a very clever boy, just like me, so I think you'll make it up. The turmoil and confusion subsided a little, and as the whole family sat down to dinner at the big table, Max was the last to leave the room, walk up to his father and hold out his busy little hand to greet him and say in a very mature manner, "I'm glad I have you, Daddy. Let's be friends." John picked him up in his arms and almost cried from happiness. Then he answered, "Sorry me, Max, for not being around, but I'll make it up to you, and now we'll always be together." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Victoria even cried. At last all her cherished dreams were coming true. She and John and her son were living together. Rosaline she had long loved and called her daughter and princess. Finally, the kids went to bed in their rooms after playing, and John and Victoria went to their bedroom too, and finally got some privacy. After so many years of separation, John saw Victoria, so beautiful and desirable in a transparent negligee, and pounced on her like a hungry wolf. The woman also longed for her beloved, and they did not sleep a wink until dawn, crying, confessing their love to each other, and holding each other tightly in their arms, as if afraid that all this happiness might evaporate. John whispered just as he had in his youth, "You're my Queen Victoria. You're my beauty. How I missed you. You are the same as before, tender, sensitive, passionate, and my favorite girl. Forgive me, my darling, for not fighting for my love then. Destiny has punished me severely for it. I won't let you go anywhere now." Victoria was melting from these sincere words. Finally, justice had been served, and they were together again, two loving hearts. She enjoyed the moment, listening to the measured breathing of her beloved, and could not believe the reality of what was happening. Dominic went to the prosecutor's office. John's case was reopened, and he drew up a sketch of the bandits who had attacked him. Incredibly, they managed to find one of them, and the other. As it turned out, he had burned to death in his car, having lost control of the car, and he was mistaken for John. The body was so charred that there was no way to recognize anything. The bandit told the story. They'd pulled a scheme like this more than once. It was called baiting. One would lie down on the roadway, and the other would attract the driver. When the driver came out to help, and not realizing it was a setup, they hit him over the head and into a ditch, and the car was stolen, had its license plate changed, and was resold. Only this time it all went wrong. On the road, the buddies got into a fight over the stolen money, and one of them threw the other one out of the car while he was driving, destroying himself. The fact that John had survived that trauma was nothing short of a miracle, thanks to Grandma Karen's healer. John and Dominic helped her in gratitude and repaired the house, rebuilt the bathhouse, and even set up a modern office for visitors. The old woman had never dreamed of this and was very happy to receive such a royal gift. Victoria decided to do charity work, remembering how she herself had been on the verge of death and had not been able to reach out for help. She set up a charitable foundation and called it Do Good. Here they helped all the needy families in difficult situations, found clinics, arranged auctions and exhibitions of paintings. All the proceeds went to pay for the treatment of these people. The very memorable book in a bound book was now kept as a talisman in a prominent place in their bedroom. After all, it was the book that helped the family find their loved ones and unite the whole family many years later. Anna was proud of her daughter-in-law and loved her, and they became very close during this time. They had long heart-to-heart talks, cooked together, and worried about their men, who were still immersed in the oil business. Rosalind went to first grade, and proud and important Max took her everywhere and patronized her, threatened all the boys. "Don't forget, whoever hurts his sister, I'll twist his head off. Understand?" At last the troubles and misfortunes receded, and an idyll was born in the Morozov family. John decided to finish what he could not do many years ago, and finally proposed to Victoria, as it should be, standing on his knee and with a ring in his hand. The woman burst into tears, for it had once been her most cherished dream. What girl does not dream of a wedding in a white dress in her youth? Probably none. But when John now, years later, decided to have a big wedding, Victoria was suddenly embarrassed. "Shouldn't we? We're not 18 anymore. You and I have 2 children. You've been married before. How would that look? Maybe we should just get married quietly, that's all. Why all the pomp and circumstance? The important thing is that we're together." But the man answered emphatically, "No, my dear, you can't get out of the wedding. I'm a wealthy man, and I can afford to celebrate it in style. After all, we only live once. I want everyone in the world to know that I'm marrying the best woman in the world, and you're finally going to be Victoria." There was a lot of hustle and bustle ahead, and finally that long-awaited day had arrived. Happy Victoria looked at herself in the mirror and could not believe the reality of what was happening. Today, she was getting married to John, just as she had always dreamed, and it doesn't matter that she had to go through a lot of trials and more than one test of strength on the way to the eviction. If 2 hearts are truly in love, they will find each other sooner or later anyway and be together. Dominic and Anna sat at a table in an expensive restaurant and watched in fascination as the newlyweds danced the wedding waltz. John gently embraced and twirled his sweetheart as if she were a weightless butterfly. Victoria was extremely beautiful in a gorgeous snow-white dress with rhinestones, and her hair with a tiara made her look even more like a princess from a fairy tale. Dominic snuggled up to his wife and suddenly said dreamily, "Hey, how wonderfully they dance. Just a sight to behold. They're cooing like doves. Let's show the youngsters how to waltz. Let's show young people how to dance the waltz." "Hey, my dear." Everyone clapped and marveled at the way John's parents danced at their age, as if a second wind had opened up. One of the guests was the first to shout, "And now bitter." Everyone else picked up on it, and the newlyweds began to kiss passionately, forgetting everything in the world. The holiday was a success, and the whole family spent a long time remembering the most interesting moments and looking over the pictures. Now in the evenings, the family would gather around the fireplace and have fun, sharing their impressions of the day and entertaining the kids. Victoria turned out to be a great wife and mom, and the most beloved daughter-in-law. And that's how it is.